So welcome everyone to the Empathy Week webinar series. This is talk number 3. I've got Raymond Tannor with me, who's a good friend, and we were just laughing just before this went live that we flipped the switch because Ray is a podcast host, Peace of No Mind. Check it out. I'm not going to plug. Well, I am going to plug it because
definitely plug yourself.
season 2 has yours truly, myself on it, and the mic quality is amazing. We were recording at the Roundhouse, and the funny thing about recording that was just before the pandemic hit. Well, we knew it was coming, but we laughed about being locked down and what's going to happen, and it did. But sorry, that's a really weird intro. But
No, that was a great intro. That was
Ray
a great intro, honestly. And you talking about the episode where we were laughing about it. If we knew what was really to come, we probably would have been crying. There would have been some sobbing, like, oh, what, we've got a whole year, a year and this time in March, like we still won't be free, mate. It's life.
Yeah.
It's life. It is
literally
crazy.
it's a year, isn't it? I think probably to the day.
Yeah, it's a year, man. Can you believe what has happened? But it was still a great episode, and I think it's testimony to you and some of the work that you were doing. That was recorded early in the year, and by the time it came out, which was end of December, around December times, it was still as relevant, and you were still speaking some truths, and there was still some hard-hitting journeys and lessons to be taken away from that. And that was like a year later. It's like, that's the power of quality.
Yeah. And before this turns into just something about
Yeah.
about me, I'm gonna
great empathy flip it back. Yeah, God.
But I am so glad you're here, because now I do get to reverse it and saying that I haven't asked you questions about how you got into this, and you have had some. I didn't even realize. I think I was probably the first person you interviewed, or one of the first people you interviewed for that series too. But you've had people on your podcast that have upwards of 3-4 million followers on Instagram, celebrities. You've then had people that are just doing amazing, interesting things. And a lot of people will look at you, and especially as podcasting is just this thing that is going up and up and up and up in the world as a media format. There'll be young students out there watching this that are like, I want to get into podcast, I want to have a podcast, I've got an idea, but I don't know where to start. And so I'm so glad you're here, because we're going to talk about that, and then obviously through the lens of empathy as well, like how that relates. But let's start at the beginning. School, growing up. Where did you grow up? School. What did you enjoy?
Okay, so I grew up in northwest London, and I say that, and then I point to like what you can't see is a poster of like Abbey Road. And basically it's not just because I'm a Beatles fan or that, like I'm like, oh, City of Westminster, but I grew up in like northwest London, so Kilburn, and then I used to go sixth form in Baker Street, and basically it's a 10-minute walk, Abbey Road. I used to just go past it. I like it, to me it's just another street near my house. So yeah, it's crazy how when we used to see tourists outside of it all the time, it would be like, oh no, we're not appreciating this for what this is. Like, we're just walking because it's the road that gets us to where we need to get to, but this is like legendary Abbey Road. But enough about Abbey Road. But that was pretty much the come up. I went to school in Maida Vale, so not too far from Kilburn. What was I into? Was that one of the questions? Like, what was I into growing up?
Yeah, what were your passions? What were were you sporty? Were you musical?
Do you know what, man? I was I did quite a lot of there was a period where I was quite into drama and theatre studies, weirdly. I say that. And I say weirdly because like my school had like minimal facilities, and I don't think at the time we even knew what we just liked playing around in those classes. And yeah, like I remember one of the teachers, one of my teachers in like year 9, shout out her, she made it clear that like, the power of drama is the ability to articulate your words. Your power is to read a script and to kind of be whoever you want to be. And for a lot of people who've had limited experiences and they weren't able to visualize a world outside of their own or understand how they could relate to people outside of their own, there was something quite important about that lesson I look back on now. And I was like, oh, wow, that was like honing your ability to kind of either make yourself larger than life, or if you didn't believe some of your attributes, you can almost like step in at showtime now. Like this is it. Whether you believe it, like now's the time to go for it. Like this is you. So that was like one of the subjects where it hit hard with me, and I cared about it. And you notice that about some of the subjects that you care about, and they don't even feel like you're going into a lesson. It's just like, yo, like it's 2 hours of like, yo, that is cool. All right, I'll read this. What shit? Like it just felt natural. And yeah, I've got to be thankful for like that introduction, because it gave me some skill sets that I felt I would be a little bit lost without it, as I've navigating myself through the thing we call adulthood. So yeah, that's some of my earlier bits.
Great. And it also sounds like, you didn't realize maybe at the time those skills that you were developing. And I think that's what I've seen in my students when as being a teacher a few years ago, that I saw that lots of my students had such amazing skills, but they would downplay them, or they wouldn't think that they were relevant or necessary to the outside world. But I think as you get into adulthood, as you've said, you realize that, okay, that's where I potentially learned that skill from, or that's how I got introduced to this. And that bit between now, from you being at school to now being an audio producer, if that's the right way of framing what you're doing, and as a podcast host, how have you ended up here? And because I believe like you're really passionate about it, you're passionate about other people's stories, and I know that you help other people on their podcasts and things like that. So how have you got to this? How have you got to your kind of dream job?
And so argue like you could I would be lying to you if I was saying now podcasting as a medium, I didn't even know what that was. Like I was 16. I just knew that some of the things that I'd loved doing was having conversations with people, and not just people, but really getting to the nitty gritty of it. It never felt like I was orchestrating any conversation. It's always just felt like it's come from a really organic, curious space. And I was probably told off countless of times for being the kid who talked too much, being the kid who was always there, like really like engrossed in someone's story or telling a story. And then I look back and I'm like, that was a kid who was super curious about the world and loved connecting with humans and other people and hearing about their experiences, but not knowing how I was, not knowing how you can make that transition into something that could either be a full-time career, something that could be a hobby. You just don't know what it is. Your ability to connect to people. What does that? How do you transfer that? What is that like in monetary gain? Which shouldn't be the way of looking at things. But at the time, when they're like, what do you want to do with your life? And it was just like, no, I know what interests me, and I'm just going to keep going along this path. So after sixth form, I studied a degree in psychology, and this was like I studied psychology because the one thing that I knew that I remember being 18, and what one of the teachers who I was speaking to, and I was filling out my personal statement, was like, why do you want to study psychology? And in the back of my mind, I knew that the way that we had to, the one thing no one really teaches you about is how to survive and make connections and understand the world, so that if yourself and your sanity is what you're living with for the whole of your life, surely we should be trying to be as much like we'd want to be masters of that, or if not masters, at least have an awareness of like, all right, cool, this is the person I'm going to be with for a long period of time. I better it would make sense for me to at least understand how my own thought process, and that was my initial goal. And then you get into studying a psychology degree and you realize it isn't about you and your mind alone. It's more about the world and the people within it, and how you've been conditioned through a series of, like, whether you would argue it's nature or nurture, which has helped hone who you are and your place in it, and what you find valuable. So I don't want to spend too long on that, but if that's how that to me was more of like the initial interest of, all right, cool, you love learning about that, you love connecting with people. What do you now want to do with all of this? And I remember leaving university, and instantly a friend of mine was like, oh, there's a job at like NHS 111. And for those who don't know what 111, it's like the non-urgent 999. So every day, someone will call, like I say every day, it was like every time you hung up the phone, someone else would call. And it
I've
would be
called
like,
111 a few times.
oh man, listen, I was probably on the receiving end. It was like, well,
I was going to say I didn't get much, not great
you get much
information.
support. All right, cool. Because you weren't speaking to me, man. If you were speaking to me, you would have had the most pleasant experience. And I joke, but at the same time, there was the kind of the varied levels of calls. So you'd have people who would call for like a cough. You'd have someone who'd call because they had like a splinter. But then you'd get really severe calls where it might be someone's not breathing and then they really should have called 999. Or in some other situations, you might get suicidal patients. And what I found was quite interesting about that is you were never able to hang up a phone on a suicidal patient, especially if they hadn't, say they not taken anything. You had to stay on the phone until the ambulance were to arrive. And if the ambulance didn't deem it as a priority, you could be on the phone with them for like an hour and a half, just until someone knocks on their door. And what I found, and I'm like countless of times, whenever I was on the phone to a suicidal patient, they were always like, "You have the most soothing tones." And I was just like, nah, man, like, but obviously, like, we're allowed to speak about everything but why they did it and what they've taken, because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a trained professional, but I can speak about everything else. And they were just always just like, you got soothing tones, you've made me feel calm, you've made me feel at ease. And yeah, it was just always something in the back of my mind because there was a few cases I could isolate and say that happened. And then after like a year and a bit, I'd ended up leaving 111 to work for an O2 store, which it sounds crazy, but it wasn't just an O2 store. It was like an opportunity to change, to be the store of the future and be a part of this really cool project with other creatives. And at the time, I just knew I wanted a change and I needed a change. And I was like, let me just do this for a bit of time and see what comes of this. And if anything, it's just like a stepping stone until I get a full-time job, which you can justify to someone. Yeah, I feel like I'm just rambling, mate.
No, it's great. I can break you up because I didn't mind talking.
Please do.
What I was going to say is,
yeah.
What sticks out for me there is that there is already on your story, there is no final destination. There is just, I'm enjoying this, I'm going to experience it, I'm going to see how it goes. And I think my experience now of students or even adults, we all think we've got to get to this. And I do it all the time. I do it to myself, even if I'm looking at the numbers of like how many video engagements they get last week from Empathy Week and how many students to take part. And, you know, you get wrapped up in these metrics and numbers. And it seems like for you as well, you could have easily got wrapped up in, I must get a full-time job straight away. But you went from, I'm just going to experience this and I'm enjoying it and seeing how it goes. And then, like you say, I went to an O2 store, which other people might have thought was a weird decision, but for me, it was the right decision. I think and then it's clearly led on to other things.
Mate, you're 100% right. And I think one of and I joke about it with some of my secondary school friends sometimes, it was like, I was fairly academic, but I always knew in the bottom of my heart that I would hate the idea of working a corporate job. I can do it, I can smile, I can be there, I can be jovial, we'll have the best of time when we're there. But as in, that can't be the reason I'd have to wake up every day, like, and just put on a suit and then just be chasing major funds. It was like, yo, this is a long journey. And at least there should be moments within that where you're either feeling fulfilled or you're trying new things and, you know, you're doing what makes your heart sing. And I think essentially that's what you should be doing. And it's easier said than done, but that's always been something in the back of my mind. It's like you're privileged enough to understand this, you're able to objectively take a look at the larger picture, and you say, look, I would rather be doing something I love on a lower salary than raking in crazy amounts of cash, and being in places where, you know, I'm not learning, I'm not being inspired, and I'm not able to bring my whole self.
Yeah, amazing. And that's something that I think probably people go, why would you want a lower salary if you could have a higher one? But it's that passion, isn't it? It's waking up and doing something that you love, and you can't beat it.
Yeah.
So how did the podcast start? How did Peace of No Mind, and why? Well, let's start with, you've started a podcast and you've called it Peace of No Mind. Why?
Okay, so started podcast called it Peace of No Mind. There was a book that I was reading. It was Eckhart Tolle and New Earth, I think. Don't hold me to that. But there was a book I was reading, and it was talking about the actual concept of a peace of mind being hard to achieve. And the reason why is because the mind can never really be at peace, especially when it's constantly reacting and constantly overacting. Really, the only way to gain peace is to be in a state of no mind. And I was like, yeah, there's something here. Like, and I don't know why those words just they stuck with me. And I was just like, like a state of no mind, a state of no mind, like. And I don't know, I was just pondering it, and like, it just never left my head for like a day or two. And it was like, you know what? There's something in it. This peace of no mind. There's something in this, but I don't know what it is that I would want to make of this. I just know I like this whole concept of the mind being in a state of no mind, or the mind being in a no mind state to achieve peace. And there was a lot of spiritual reading I was doing at the time, so I was very much like intertwined in that whole world for a period of time. And yeah, going back to the O2 story, I met someone at O2 who was a radio presenter, and that was why it was weird to say that I jumped to O2. But he was a radio presenter who'd basically, I told him that I felt like I'd missed the boat, and that I'd always wanted to do radio when I was at uni, but missed the opportunity. And he was like, "There's no missed time. Try, just give it a go. You've got nothing to lose." And I just remember going home after that conversation and being like, yo, typed in on Google radio dropping classes or radio teaching classes, anything with the word, just keywords. And I found a course at the Roundhouse, which was like a 6-week drop-in session where it basically taught you about the basics of radio. Went to this course for 6 weeks, loved it, met amazing people. It opened my eyes to the idea that I could still be learning. I could also be recording in a professional studio for like £2 an hour, and that I could create whatever I wanted to with no holds, with no bars at all. So yeah, just off the back of that, they offered me a monthly radio show, and I was fortunate enough to continue that show for a year. And the show was where I used the name Peace of No Mind, and it started out heavily music focused, but music that was in line with themes around mindfulness and mental health. And then slowly I started incorporating more speech, and then just tightening up the format. But very much thankful to the time that I spent at the Roundhouse, because it was a trial and error, failure, going through the whole process, understanding how audio was really working, before I was able to refine it to the podcast it is today. And it's still on a journey. It's still on a journey. So that's how Peace of No Mind started. Yeah, more so.
Amazing. My setup has just
I did. I saw the lights.
You saw. I was like, oh no, there's been a power cut, and there isn't. It's just there's a battery missing. So I'm going to do a very professional thing, in the sense of I'm going to literally take 10 seconds to go get a new battery.
Go. I was like, yeah.
There we go. Oh, look at that.
Seamless.
I hope you entertained them whilst I was gone, Ray.
100%. I didn't even know you were gone. I was literally like, I was just enjoying.
And you think you're prepared for everything, and then something happens. Oh no!
Have I lost you?
No, you're there. Okay, I thought now you've frozen as this is going really well. Right. Moving on. So
Wait, hold on, I've just yanked out my own headset. There we go.
Right, I think
Lovely.
we've got rid of all of the problems in 20
All the
seconds there,
technical
so
woes.
hopefully we're good.
I feel
So
like that
no,
was
that's
an invitation for more problems, but please.
that's good. We're all good.
Yeah.
No, so that's really interesting. I think
Mhm,
again, it solidifies that opportunity to
mhm,
opportunity,
mhm.
and not missing the boat is also a thing that I think a lot of us think about. We're just like, oh, I'm too old, or I didn't do that. I didn't pick the right GCSE, or I didn't pick the right A level, or I didn't study the right thing. Reality is now,
Mhm.
what I used to say to my students is, you have no excuse for not learning something. The thing called people I speak to, or other videographers and things that, like me, have just learned through YouTube, say, oh, I went to YouTube University.
Yeah.
Literally just went online, typed something into YouTube and watched it, because there are people out there giving courses and content for free.
Yeah.
You can learn and you can do anything. And I think if you say, like you said, if you look for opportunities, you
Mhm.
can't just wait for opportunities to fall into your lap. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen. You know, all this manifestation stuff that I see, you know, on Instagram and stuff a lot of the time. Like, you know, there's definitely, I'm a big believer in visualization and stuff,
Mhm.
but you've got to do the work, and you've got
100%.
you've got to go and actually seek out those opportunities. And you went and did that, and I want that to
Yeah.
be a big message that comes out of this.
100%. And I think just off the back of that, there's something that I always use. It's or remind myself of is time passes whether you're doing something or nothing. Like time will pass. That is the one guarantee. Like a year will go from today. It will go, and you know you can what you choose to do in that space. Whether that was I just tried it, it didn't work, or I was time was passing. Like have fun with it. Like don't be held to these age barriers or these boundaries of what you think you should be achieving. Time is passing consistently and continuously. Please just trial and do and be and just grow in it. Like there's no harm. There's no harm. There's no right or wrong. Just move.
Exactly. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
use the time that
Use
you've
the
got,
time. Yeah.
because that is the only thing that is of real value.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to talk about guests
Yeah.
and having guests on your podcast, and you can list quite a few amazing people that you've had on podcasts. How have you utilized? We're going to get into empathy a little bit more now.
Mm-hmm.
How has your empathy developed
Mm-hmm.
through having people on your podcast, and by interviewing people? How has your understanding of
Mm-hmm.
other people in the world changed from doing that process?
Yeah. I think one thing you mentioned, like some of these guests have like large followings, and some of them might be prominent or were really big back in the day, but no longer are. That has never been the criteria for Peace of No Mind at all. And especially when I started out, like the first person I interviewed was a friend, and the one thing it was that there's value in everyone's story. Everyone's got a way that they view the world that can either give you solace and help you to either motivate yourself, help you bring yourself back from a dark place, or see some similarities that again can help you recalibrate where you think you fit in this world. And the like I said, the criteria was never how do you get the largest person on here. Of course, it would in my mind it was like, oh yeah, it would be fun to interview an Idris Elba, which I haven't got on. Like for personal reasons, that would be fun, but that doesn't mean that's value. And that's no offense to Idris, because I'm sure he could bring some value. But what
I'm sure he would
I'm
bring.
sure, of
Idris, if you're
course,
listening to this.
bro, please, my brother, I've been shouting you out for now. It's not that, but it's I find, and again, some of the episodes which in the process and when I've been recording them, the ones I've been most moved by are people who the world may have not heard about. And
Me.
well, look at this, look at this.
I'm
And
just
this is what,
plugging myself
no,
again.
no, you're not though. But this is what I mean. Like, there were people who reached out to me, like after hearing maybe your episode and then some other episodes where they felt like that was someone that they could relate to a little bit differently, and they felt like I see my friend or I see myself in that. So the criteria should never have been like who is it that we can get in that regard. That's me thinking as well. Like if you can bring all of the flavors and all of the colors of this world onto this podcast, how would you go about doing that? And everyone's got a story to tell, and everyone's story is important. And yeah, it's all about how you frame that story and how they also frame it, that can help someone else, or can help provide a light for someone else.
It's so interesting hearing you talk, because it's like a mirror, but in just a different format, right? So you're podcasting, but I'm thinking from a video perspective, and it's like absolutely everyone has a story. And
Yeah.
Natasha, who was a film, one of the films that was shown last week, I literally was in Brixton, when was it? End of May, start of June last year. I was working, and this was before the big Black Lives Matter protest. This was like a mini one in the week before. It was a Wednesday, I think. And one of my housemates came back and just went, "Oh, the protest, like they've blocked the high road in Brixton. Like they're in the middle. People are sitting down of the junction." And I literally just grabbed my camera, ran outside, and I saw this woman who just for some reason just stuck out to me, mainly because she had a cap that had Black Lives Matter on her t-shirt. It's like she'd been waiting for this moment. And I just asked, I do snap people, and I just generally, but I said, can I take a portrait of you? Like, I really wanted one of her, like, looking into the camera. And I then just texted her after and shared the photo with her. She was like, "Wow, it's amazing." And then we just got chatting. And I said, "Look, I do this thing, Empathy Week. Do you want to take part?" And, you know, her story is unbelievable, but you would just walk past her in the street. And it just, that solidified for me what you're just saying there about everyone has a story. Everyone has a story, and everyone's is equal value of other people. And I really like that idea that, so what if people have got loads of followers and whatever? That's not why you've got, and I know that's not why you've got them, because I know, like, for example, Vicky Patterson, like, that came through work, that connection, right? Because you've been doing her podcast and whatever. And often people think that, you know, you go out your way to get all these people, or you want the person with the highest following, but actually you're right, it's so much about the story.
But it's so much about the story. And hopefully, if anyone has an opportunity to listen to any of the episodes, I hopefully what the initial conversation sets up how this even came, how the person was even in this field. I haven't got out and like tried to get, it's like every person is like naturally kind of gravitated into this world. And they were stories that I felt everyone is deserving of being there. And arguably, even the stories that have had the most plays, if you're going to use that as a metric, some of them aren't even super notable people. Some stories, some individuals who you would argue have smaller following have actually a lot more plays, and their stories are so much more engaging. So it's a terrible metric if you're going to start basing it on social media. Where's the impact in that?
What role does empathy have in podcasting, just generally?
So
how important is it for you to understand someone, maybe before or during?
So I think empathy as a whole, one of the reasons why podcasting has become so prominent and has really exploded more so in the last few years, not saying it hasn't been around before then, is because it's able to speak directly to communities and nurture niche experiences and hold a mirror up to people who don't feel represented. And I think that, to me, if there's anything, if there's any way to highlight empathy, is that people have been able to create audio that speaks directly to an experience, through a means that they felt was easily accessible. And yeah, it's managed to reach either thousands of people who never felt like they were heard or seen, or people who are feeling really heard and seen. It doesn't matter. But if we're talking about reflecting someone's experience, the host or the guest that they bring on, if that is the format that they're choosing to use, it's empathy is always running throughout that whole process, and it's running through the communities they build. And it's, you know, it's when they're thinking about the way that they're growing, it's like, how do we want to connect to more people, and what are our core values, and what are our morals, and, you know, where do we see those, where can we connect the dots? And I think that, to me, is always something you can see from some of the most popular podcasts. They've really got an engaged community who feel like they are heard and seen, and that someone else understands their experience, or is able to at least relay information in a way that is super digestible for them.
Yeah, amazing. Leading on from that
Mm-hmm.
question, I was quite proud of this question actually, because
Like
I think it now it's going to be rubbish. Who's the person you've interviewed who is the least like you, and what did you learn from them?
the least like me? Goodness. The least like me. Whoa. So I'm thinking of like the first. So I've recorded 24 episodes so far, and 2 series, series 1 and 2. From this series, least like me, but I'd argue that I see a small part of myself in everyone.
Okay, maybe if I reframe
I
it, so
think that is a good
someone
question.
that
It is, but
someone that is you probably would never have met
Mhm,
had you not been doing a podcast. So you wouldn't have crossed paths with them. You
mhm.
wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we could even argue, like, and just because you'd mentioned her name, and it's just top of my head, you could argue that someone like Vicky Patterson, we should not be in the same. Like, it's not that we wouldn't have anything in common, but like, she was on reality TV, an amazing individual, from up north. I'm from London, like, not being in reality TV, not in that world at all. Um, in terms of what we probably spend our pastime doing, nothing similar, like crossovers there, no crossovers. But the beauty to me in that was that there was a really like away from the podcast, there was a real connection, and there's a real level of respect that I have for her. And I didn't, by the way, I'd never watched Geordie Shore before interviewing her, seen snippets here and there, but I'm not a sycophant. Like so like, oh my God, Javrig is like, yo, how you doing?
Most people listening to this, especially if you're abroad, if you're not in the UK, if you're in countries around, you would never have heard of her. But Vicky is just, she's a reality TV star. She's not on reality TV anymore, but it was interesting her talking about that. But yeah, very interesting. So what did you, how have you learned and understood more about her, especially considering, like, you could have looked her up, and I'm sure you'd seen, like you say, snippets of her and judgments of her character. What was it that through doing the podcast with her, and maybe also working with her, that you've learned about her, which was like, oh wow, okay, I've learned something a lot here?
Yeah. So one thing which I'd taken away from her just in general was her ability to treat people with a level of respect that every human deserves. And I think it's quite easy to look at someone who you would look at and you'd say they're far removed from my life, whether that's financially, whether that's like public appeal, whether there's so many reasons. And I think there was always something really grounding, and you connect to it in everyone you meet, and you notice it when you meet someone who is in that same space. Something's really grounding about their energy, about how they're able to speak to you and sincerely ask you questions, and actually are really interested in what it is that you have to bring to the world. And I think I treasure those people, whether you are, you've got millions of followers, whether I've met you on the street, whether I've met you at a party, whether I've met you through a friend. Someone who genuinely takes the time to be like, yo, how are you feeling? Or this was my experience, and, connect on a human level. And you recognize that in people, and it's like, yo, nothing this life can offer me can stop me from doing that to another human. And I think that should always be my goal. How do I connect with another human, and how do I make sure that I never leave them in a worse situation because of my interaction? And I think that to me is something which I've tried to always, and it's always in the back of my mind. How do I cause the least harm to anyone that I'm interacting with? How do you go through this life, not just causing the least harm, but leaving such a light or inspiration or positivity on another that they can go off and do the same.
Oh yeah, lovely, amazing. I like that, thinking about what my actions have on other people, and which is something we don't often, we like to say we think about, but often we don't. We just go, right, number one, what do we need? What do I need to do? thinking back also about, because yes, you run a podcast, but your work as an audio producer as well. How do you get into that line? How do you? There's probably people that are going to watch this that are going to say, "Oh, I want to get into podcasting, but I also want to do it for other people," which is part of your work. How do you get into that?
So I was super fortunate, and I say super fortunate because throughout me testing and trialing Peace of No Mind over the years, what I didn't realize I was doing was teaching myself how to edit. And I remember like when one of the first opportunities, and I'll explain quickly how I got into it, but one of the first paid opportunities I was getting, it was like, "Oh, have you edited before?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I kind of do this thing for Peace of No Mind." They're like, "Oh no, so you know how to edit?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I do then." Like, and it was it was a weird realization that I'd been honing a skill that I thought was just being used to make this end result of like, let's get this podcast out. But it's like, no, this is a useful skill and other people need it too. And the ability to reach out to guests, and that is part of a producer's role. Writing briefs, working out questions, that is part of a producer role. And this goes back to the idea that time's passing whether you're doing something or nothing. So while you're flowering your own garden, you're picking up a whole set of tools that you never know will come back into use. But I was super fortunate. I came across this program called Multi-Track Fellowship, which is an entry level program to get exciting audio producers into the world, like for those with minimal experience but who wanted an opportunity to either working in podcasting or develop documentaries or just radio programs as a whole. And I left my full-time job 3 months beforehand, to just because I was in this job, it sounded great on paper. Everyone was like, "Oh, you work here, that must be so cool." It's like, yeah, it is cool. But I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. Like my actual day-to-day tasks weren't fulfilling. They weren't making me excited. And I made the decision. It was the first time I'd ever left a full-time job without securing another job. And life didn't reward me. I won't be giving you that story of like, yeah, and then a week later I begged my dream. It was like, no, I'm 4 months later, and
You're eating
4 months later I was like,
chips,
yeah,
and
exactly.
mushy peas.
Bro, walking, like I was walking everywhere because of oyster funds. It was like calculating, like, is this a good spend? I don't think this is a good spend.
I still do
Maybe
that.
Well,
with the rail card, it's like I will book meetings with someone in London after 9:30 because I'll miss the
the peak hours,
travel, and then I'll cycle if I can. And
oh man,
yeah,
it was like, I think that was new to me. I hadn't been in that situation where I'd had to worry since I'd left uni like that. And all of a sudden it just, life came hard and fast. And there's your sense of, I feel like I've done the right thing in the world. I left a role that wasn't fulfilling. This hasn't been rewarded in the way that I thought it would be. Disheartened. And then it was kind of like, no, like, there is a lot of value in this. And I remember as soon as that had happened, I stumbled across this multi-track fellowship, like on the 5th month. And I was like, oh, it's an internship. I've just left a full-time job for an internship. And I jumped on it and I didn't know what would happen. I remember being like, let the 4-week placement go and do the other 4-week placement. So that was 8 weeks in total. And what will be, will be. Like I can stress and worry throughout the 8 weeks. Is this going to lead to a full-time job? Have I like just you're involved now? You're involved in something you've wanted to touch in. You're speaking to people who are doing this legitly. You're working on, like, even if it's on a research capacity, you're working on projects that you were dreaming about. Like this is an amazing opportunity. And thankfully, what ended up happening after I finished the 2 internships, I got another 3-month job at one of the production companies I was working with, and then pandemic came, and I had no work. I had no work for a month and 2, and again reality hit, and it was like, did you make the right decision? And just the way of the world, I did, and then life continued to unfold, and there was work because people didn't realize I didn't have work. I'm sorry if I've made that more confusing than it needed to be. I wasn't being vocal about my willingness to work. So I'd finish this one placement and someone assumed that I would be fine and working on something else, when in reality, all they needed to hear was, oh, Raymond, oh yeah, of course, we would have loved to have got you on this project. Here's some work. So yeah, I've been super fortunate, and throughout that whole time, it's being a student of your craft, being student to people who've been in it longer, being a student to understanding, listening to what's out there, and working out how can I add value in this sector. Like, fair enough, I could take space and just be like, yeah, I make podcasts too, but it's like, what do you want to be in this space for, and what do you want to be remembered for? When someone mentions your name in the room that you're not in, what do you want them to say about you? And I think that to me is kind of now that journey and that mission.
What a way to think about it. Yeah. What would someone
Yeah.
say about me if I wasn't in the room? And also a really good point about, you've got to put yourself out there. How can someone, why do companies spend so much money on advertising? Sometimes I think, I'm like, why have I seen another advert for McDonald's? McDonald's is the most well-known brand in the world.
Yeah.
They still spend millions and millions and millions on advertising, because they're constantly just saying, look, we're still making, it sounds ridiculous, but we're still making food, we're still open. But in your head, you're going, oh, okay, McDonald's. And then, subconsciously you see the golden arches and you're like, oh, I might go and get one. But you have to put yourself out there, and you have to be like, look, I'm not particularly great at doing that.
I'm awful.
But we need to, I think there's an element of, we sometimes think that, we're building ourselves up to be more than we are, and this imposter syndrome creeping in. But actually, like you've said, you just got to go for it. And what's really nice to hear, it's not nice to hear, but reassuring, is that there's so many moments in your path to becoming, where you are now, which was only like recently, right, that things have started to go, okay, I'm an audio producer, and start to click. You had those moments where you're just like, I've made the wrong decision leaving, or have I made the right decision? And I think there's, life is made up of choices, and you just got to go with it. But what's next? What's next for you and the podcast and producing?
I think I just want to quickly touch on the point that you're saying about about promotion in general. That is the most valid lesson, and it is one of the things that I'm terrible at. Like, the idea of like telling people like, this is I'm doing this, or I've made this, have a look at it, again, oh yeah, just in case you haven't looked at it, have another look. Like, to me, it's like, how do you not want to be, I don't want to pest anyone, I don't want to annoy anyone. But it's not, you've made something that deserves to be heard. Like, the world, it doesn't, whatever the world makes of it afterwards, that's fine. But it deserves, you've put work in, you value the stories that have been told. It deserves to be heard, like, and not for your own sake, but there's so much gold that can help another person. So it's definitely something I'll be lying to you if I said I'm fully over the idea of like self-promotion. I'm just a really like under the radar, let me just do my best, always under the radar, and then bring something out and then back under the radar. But
I was going to say, sorry, because I've just realised that actually, no, hang on, I promote the hell out of Empathy Week all the time. But I find it I'm not very good at like promoting myself as a personal brand, maybe, but I find it way easier to get behind. Like, I can put Empathy Week there and I can promote that as much as possible, because it's not on me. It's like, I want schools to go and register. I want students to have that opportunity. I want, and it's all kind of there. Do you find that with your show as well, that you can like shout about Peace of No Mind, because it isn't Raymond Tannor, it's Peace of No Mind?
Do you know what? It's easier. It's still not fully easy. I vouch for every episode there, and I love every person I've had the pleasure of interviewing. So to me, there was a small element of like, they're all quality episodes, so have a listen if you want. But it's not. It's a terrible way to go at it, because you need to make things easier for someone to have a listen. You need to at least remind me. You need to put it in front of me. And then there's also just that part of being, like, just not wanting to annoy people and not wanting to bombard people, but no one views it that way, and no one views it the way that you view it. And you end up causing yourself a lot of, and this goes back to the idea of peace of mind, because if we don't talk about it, you end up causing yourself a lot of turmoil. because of the way you view a situation. And in reality, like, that isn't how the world views it. Your perspective of that one event is not how we all view that one event. We are so individual. So if someone sees it, they're like, "Oh yeah, man, I did mean to listen to Raymond's podcast. Let me have a listen." Whereas me, it was like, "Oh, I sent him an old episode 6 weeks ago. Of course, he doesn't want another episode this week." And it's like, no, it's got, like, get over yourself. Get out of your own way, because you're the problem. You're the one who's going to end up causing yourself the most distress, because you're trying to soften what you think soften the blow for other people. It's not your responsibility. Just deliver what you believe in, and do it respectfully, I'd say. But yeah.
Amazing. Last minute or so.
Oh, go ahead.
I've loved this. It's flown by. I feel like people are just tuning in, watching us have a conversation, but that's probably a great thing for people as well. The thing I was going to say is, oh God, the question's gone out of my head now. What was I going to say? Oh, that was it. Right. I'm 15 years old. I've listened to this. I've seen you. I thought Ray is a cool guy. He's just followed his gut and just gone with stuff. I have no idea where to start, and I'm potentially in a different country. I can't search the things that he's searched up. Where do I start? How do I want to do my own podcast. What can I do? Can I do it with a phone? You know, how can I do how can I make my own podcast?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In a nutshell, it's never been easier to make a podcast than where you are now. And you can look at some amazing podcasts and you can say that, look at the glitz, look at the glamour, look at the investment, look at the visuals, look at the microphone. That is amazing. And that might be step 7. Where you are right now, use what you have and do what you can with what you have. So whether that's a mobile phone in the middle of a table, pressing record, and then you and a friend maybe speaking, if you decide that to be the format, whether you're in isolation because of what's happened for Corona, a headphone, a Zoom account or a Google Meets or whatever free software. I know with Zoom, it's just one other person. You can use it up to 40 minutes for free. You've got the potential to a proof of concept. To me, it's always about proof of concept and refinement. Stop worrying about perfection, because no way did I have this podcast where it is now in the first 2 years, a year and a half of me going through the radio kind of situation. Don't let a perfected, polished piece deter you from trying and finding your own voice. One thing I would say is just make sure that if you want to make a podcast, look at who's doing something similar, and look at ways that you and your experience will be able to, bring a unique take on it. The world's got loads of conversations with friends in a room, which is great. And, there's your conversation with your friends might be hilarious. But, sometimes when you're looking at across it all, you might ask yourself, what is it you want this podcast to do? What you want someone to take away? And if you can answer those questions, then it will help the way that you can frame that first conversation, whether that's with a friend, whether that's an interviewer, or whether that's just by yourself and you're guiding. So iterative process. Don't be hard on yourself. Allow yourself to grow. Allow yourself to fail. Allow yourself to grow and fail. Knock yourself back 2 steps and then take one forward. It's always an iteration, and yeah, that's where I am.
Amazing. So we don't need your help producing our podcast.
Done.
Okay. Ray has no job in the future because we can do it all ourselves.
I worry. No,
but honestly, thank you so much for coming on. That is a great way to end this little webinar. Go and do it. I think we always see people step 7, step 8, and don't realize that step 1 starts with this, or step 1 starts with a piece of paper and a pen even. So that's such a lovely way to end. And thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for spending your time. How can people find you if they want to check you out and check your podcast out?
You can find me at Peace of No Mind Show on Instagram, or Peace of No Mind on Twitter, or you could just type in on Google Raymond Tannor or Ray Tannor, Peace of No Mind. And just have a look, or add me on LinkedIn. And if you want to reach out, any advice, or if you like any of the episodes and you want to discuss it, like jump in my inbox and so forth. Like just do it. Like I'm accessible.
Amazing.
I'm accessible.
Thank you so much, Ray.
Thank you,
and thank you to everyone that's watching and everyone will watch in the future. Good night. Thank you very much. See you soon, Ray.
Take care, guys.
Bye.